Okay, Cheryl, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, great. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm excited to be here with you guys. My name is Cheryl Quimba, and I have a 10-year-old PDAer and a 7-year-old, I would say non-PDAer, but not unsure about neurotypical, neurodiverse, kind of where we fall in there. We're always getting to know our kids more, right? We have been doing low demand and high accommodation in our family for almost 5 years now. And that's had a significant impact on our family dynamic and on our kids with one another. You can imagine we started when my daughter was about 5. She's the PDAer, and my son was about 2. And so we've really seen just the differences that have come and the ups and downs in that. And I'm also the founder of What Helps. If you guys ever check that out, you can find me at Instagram, whathelps.me.pda. And I do posts and I work with families. So really excited to be here today with you guys.
Oh, we love you, Cheryl.
I love you
I
right
love
back.
Cheryl. Yeah, there's so much love here. All right, so let's just jump right in. I'm going to start with the first question I have on the list. It asks how to repair after conflict with a kiddo that doesn't really want to acknowledge what happened. Other kiddo feels like they are treated unfairly when circling back isn't acknowledged or listened to.
Okay, yeah, and actually, I got to exchange some messages with this mama for clarification. And we've got her 2 kids are younger, and it's the PDAer who's feeling kind of hurt and wronged by the younger sibling, and then the younger sibling doesn't want to circle back and apologize or acknowledge what they've done to the PDAer. So essentially, in that dynamic, your PDAer is going to feel a really strong sense of injustice, right? We know that our PDAers are very justice oriented. I would really encourage to kind of take a step back for like the whole situation and maybe even focus a little bit on the younger kiddo. One, I would wonder, it sounds like this is an opportunity or an attempt to control what's going on, to not have to apologize. It makes me curious if they're showing any signs of PDA at this point. Because if they are, that might be their kind of leveling or equalizing behavior where they're trying to have some sense of control with a sibling. So I would take the time to really meet with the younger kiddo and ask them more of what that's about. I would also look for a chance to meet with the PDA kiddo and just kind of validate their feelings of like, it's really hard when somebody does something wrong and it hurts us and they don't admit it, or when things don't go the way that we wish that they did. And if you can provide some kind of a dopamine hit following that, some kind of something they can equalize against. In our house, slime was huge. It gave the dopamine hit of creating something and making a mess and using the hands. And then there was just all the pulling and the stretching and, just this chance to really put some energy and release into something else. So I'm kind of, that, like I said, it's a big picture view because we're looking at everyone involved, and we are looking for what's kind of motivating each child's behavior and how they are responding in the situation.
That's good. I like that. I like that idea with the finding something else to do because I was thinking, because I have three,
Yes.
and oh my gosh. So yeah, I have a couple of them. They each show it their own way. And you're right. It's nice if you can address the thing, but then also find something else as like, okay, let's not put so much pressure on this specific thing that happened. Let's kind
Mm-hmm.
of, release the energy. You're right. Like it does help. All right. So the next one I got here, what tips or resources do you have to help siblings with their understanding of PDA?
Absolutely. And actually, I have such a weird request. I know everybody's brain is different. I do well when I can see one person's face in real life. Does anybody want to like show me their real faces? Because talking to pictures is thank you. Okay, I appreciate it. Because sometimes I like lose my train of thought where I'm like, I don't even know who I'm talking to. So that's just me. You guys are so kind. That's plenty. That's great. I see you. Thank you so much. No, no pressure for anyone who doesn't want to do it. You guys are
I
great.
would, but I'm
Um,
cleaning as I listen, and so I didn't
you
want to make
no,
anybody dizzy.
there's no pressure to do it. It's just if you are willing and you don't mind, it just helps my brain because it just helps me focus. So, yeah. So the way that that we're communicating PDA to siblings, I want to say, as hopefully the more you're in PDA circles, you're hearing this again and again and again. But it depends on your situation, right? It depends on your kid, your family dynamic. And so those are the factors we always want to look at before we go right to thinking we have a fix for how to approach something. Um, is your are the siblings older or younger, right? Do they have other co-occurring needs that impact their ability to understand what you're trying to explain to them in terms of like maturity and things like that? Um, I think that personality also plays a huge factor in how they best receive things. So I can give you just a couple of tips of what we do in our house or things that I've done with some families that I've worked with. Because my son is 3 years younger than my PDAer, and we've been at this for 5 years, we just focused on simple things like, everybody's brain is just different. The way that we're born is different. And so we'll focus on some things that make sense to them, like my son has no fear of heights and likes to flip on the trampoline. And I'm like, you love to flip on the trampoline. Your brain loves that. My brain gets super scared of heights. And if I were flipping in the air, I would freak out. Or like, your brain doesn't like this, but then someone else's brain really loves it, like being on stage or swimming in water. And since everyone's brain works differently, our brains get happy or upset by different things. And sometimes what we do is like we call my daughter Sissy. We're like, sometimes Sissy's brain gets really upset and feels really afraid. And she wishes that it didn't feel this way. And she doesn't want to feel angry or upset or scared. But her brain doesn't let her not feel that way. And so we try to help her calm down and we try to keep you safe while she's calming down. But this isn't a choice that she's making. It's hard for her too. So we're trying to like educate about the nervous system. We're trying to educate about, empathy and differences, right? We're also laying the groundwork. So as he's gotten older, we've talked specifically about autism and PDA and sensory needs. And as he matures, it comes up naturally in our family. We're all living lives together. These examples come up. He'll ask questions, or we'll point something out, or we'll explain why we are or not doing something. And your child, your other kids are going to grow with you as you are living out PDA in your family, and you're going to have these natural opportunities to explain. There are great books. I know Ruth has talked about this one before, but Poppy and the Overactive Amygdala is a great one. There's also a book, it's designed for PDAers, but I think it is really helpful for anybody who wants a glimpse in. It's called Me and My PDA. But I definitely think there's this tendency we want to sit down with a book and we want to read it to them and we want to explain it and cover all the things, but sometimes that's just too much to take in. It's much better having it happen in natural conversations where you guys are already connecting in some way to make it meaningful.
That's
And Brooke,
good. I
when I
like
get
that.
chatty, you know
No,
me. So when I
it's
get chatty,
okay.
you do.
No, actually, so I'm setting up. I was just complaining because I was like, I set up this new to me computer. And so, like you set something up and all the features aren't set up right. So I'm
Yes.
over here scrambling, trying to get.
Oh, you're doing great. You're
Oh,
great.
and I'm
Okay.
sorry. And I'm talking too loud for my youngest. I'll try to talk quieter. Okay. Anyway, so no, you're good. All right, I'll read the next one. It says, we don't have a diagnosis just yet, though we are in the process, but PDA is the first set of symptoms that finally describes my oldest son completely. My second son is having a hard time coping with the unfairness of things right now, as my oldest had to be pulled from school due to lack of support there. And of course, how we parent him at home is different too, because our main priority is not triggering massive meltdowns and keeping him safe. How do you support and or explain to your other children when it does look or even maybe is completely unfair because you have to parent each child differently, particularly when they're a little too young to fully understand just yet?
That's great. I think it's a little bit of a throwback, to the last question in terms of ages and stages and building incrementally over time and, what we help them understand. I think that I'll just touch on the school aspect, real quick. Sometimes I'll explain it with kids or other families, and I'll say like, well, if somebody fell down and they broke their leg and they were in a cast and they couldn't get up and run around and play anymore, or they couldn't go out and rake the leaves for the chore or whatever. In the same way, there are things that can kind of be hurt inside of our bodies or inside of our minds that limit what we can do. And right now, your brother or your sister had a really hard time at school, and it made them feel overwhelmed, and something was hurt, right? So we would call this educational trauma. That's what we know about it in PDA circles. But we'd say like something was too much for them, and that really hurt, and it made it hard for them to be able to focus and be able to be there. So in the same way that you would have to rest your body in a cast while it heals and gets stronger, your brother or sister needs a rest from school to be able to heal and get stronger, at home. Or in the same way that somebody might need a cane or a brace all the time, they might need to learn from home all the time. And it's not because one is bad and one is good. It's because different people need different things depending on their personalities, their strengths, their needs, right? So that's kind of, I find that taking the lens of something that's familiar to them and kind of using analogies is a really helpful way to communicate that. And then for the parenting that seems really unfair, I think it's a two-sided coin. So on the one side, I'm going to say, I would recommend, and what I've seen really work and works in our home is there are things that your non-PDA kiddo can handle, right? In terms of responsibilities and chores and going and doing things and whatever, that I think we need to let up on a lot. Not because they aren't capable, but because I think it's emotionally traumatic for them to live up to those expectations when it's not for the entire family. If that makes sense. That doesn't mean, I'm not saying don't have them live up to their potential or let them, be off the hook, and find different ways to strengthen their responsibility, engage them, maybe instead of a chore list, maybe you invite them with you to go do the chores that you're doing. Make it more relationally based and less of like a checklist of compliance. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's going to feel less dramatically unfair to them. On the flip side, which is also how we engage our PDAers, by the way, we invite them alongside of us and they can say yes or no, right? Mm-hmm. To engage and to learn these important skills. And then the other side, again, if they are old enough, if they have the emotional maturity to kind of grasp it, we plant little seeds here and we'll say, it's really unfair right now. It's unfair that you can't do these things or that you have to do these things, and it's not the same for your sibling. But this is unfair for him or her too, because like in our case, I'll say there are things that you're going to grow up and you're going to be able to do, and they're going to be so easy for you and you're going to love doing them. And there are things that, that Sissy is going to grow up and it's going to be hard for her, or she might not be able to do them. And that feels really unfair. And so, it's hard for everyone, and just kind of instilling that sense and focusing on we as a family are going through these hard things. The things that are hard for her or him, we care about. The things that are hard for you, we care about. There are things that are hard for, mommy or daddy, we care about those things. And just really try to keep it relationally based.
I was going to say too, I find it's a good opportunity to, like you say, like this, whatever is being done for the PDA child that's in obvious distress usually ends up helping everybody if you start approaching them that way. And keeping in mind too that there are different ways that PDA is expressed. And so you might have an internalizer who's miserable at school but isn't blowing up yet. So I think it's not harmful necessarily to start opening the doors to those conversations, which I know is hard for parents who are like trying to keep things afloat. And we can only do so much sometimes, but just realizing that you might have two children that are struggling and not see it yet. So if you can start that conversation early, at least you are talking them through and maybe can get ahead of some crises, more crises, I guess I should say. So,
Yeah, absolutely. You're laying that
mhm,
foundation of
yep.
communication and compassion within your
Mhm.
family.
Bingo. Okay, so next one I got here, it says, my son is 8 and constantly taking things from his sister and hitting her when he can't have something. He's very rough with her. Any tips?
Okay, I would say two things. Um, One, just, safety first. It's helpful to have a safety plan. If you know automatically that you can put your body between your kids so that one doesn't hurt the other, that you can create an exit strategy where you know how to safely get the other kiddo out of the room or with another caregiver, um, depending on your situation and your supports, which we all know are super varied. So safety first, absolutely. But the flip side is, the best, I mean, the old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Your PDA is a pot on the stove, okay? And the longer there's heat under them, the closer they are to a boil at any moment, right? So if something happens with a sibling that triggers them, all of a sudden we jump to a boil and we're like, why are you boiling, right? And in the moment, boiling water does burn, but how do we, from the moment they wake up, from the whole week or month or school year that we're planning, how do we find every possible way to turn that burner down to low so that when something happens that's out of our control that turns the burner up, there's some bandwidth. They have some capacity to cope with and absorb some of that heat, so to speak, from their nervous system and not just boil over onto their sibling.
That's good. All right. How can older siblings best support their younger siblings with PDA when babysitting? Well, I'd love a babysitter. So,
Oh my goodness, right? That's so great. Yeah, so I can, my lived experience, which is a lot of what I have, is obviously an older PDA with a younger. But I do, with some of the other families that I've worked with, have some other insights. I think that if you have a family culture where you are again keeping the burner on low, and if you can anticipate the buildup to when you're going to be asking your older child to babysit your PDAer, you're going to win half the battle right there. So in our circumstance, because I think any caregiver we bring in for our PDAer is either like barely happens or is impossible, right? And so for us, we will make sure that there is, like if a grandparent's going to babysit, we'll make sure that there's a big bandwidth leading up where like we aren't doing a lot of things the 4 or 5 days beforehand that would cause our attention to be, out of access for our PDA or that would cause them to submit to a lot of demands for wherever we're going or needing to do. We're mindful of how they've been sleeping, have they been sick? We're really looking at kind of all the pressures that are weighing down on them. And then we prepare them in advance that we're looking at this babysitting thing happening, kind of in a nonchalant way, not making it a really big emotional deal. Like, are you going to be okay? And let's make a plan. Like that feels really focused, but kind of like, oh, like I think grandma's going to come on Friday because I have this appointment. And like, oh, would you want to bake something? Or do you want me to pick something up on my way home? That's huge. So there's a phrase called a DOPA menu. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it. It's like that menu, that idea, that list you have to select from of what are the dopamine hits that I can have for when my kid is dysregulated or that I can front load for my kid to help them be in a better place before something hard, right? And so in our house, that looks like we know that there's not going to be like the tablet is completely accessible. There's an activity that's available if they want to do it. There's something that, our PDA is looking forward to showing whoever's coming. And I'm always bringing something home with me, like a small treat or some kind of weird thing from the dollar store, just something that signals a dopamine hit on my return. I'm also keenly aware because I've learned my kid of how long I'm gone. And I know my limit is like 1.5 hours to 2 hours is the sweet spot. Up to 3 hours or 3.5 hours is doable, but then we're really cracking and we've got recovery after. And anything beyond that is just like, everyone buckle up. This is going to be super hard on everyone. Our PDA is going to have a hard time, and we're all going to have a hard time. So let's drop it if we can. But if we can't, let's figure out how we're going to get through it. And let's be prepared to accept that this is going to be hard, so that we're not reacting out of like, I can't believe this is so hard. It's hard. Our expectations really shape it.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so this is going to be our last question here. It says, what are some strategies for managing screaming, yelling at a non-PDA sibling? What are some strategies to use when our PDA kid is in a more intense phase of controlling behavior, games, interactions, meals, conversations, all include trying to control the other sibling's behavior? Looking for advice both for addressing it in the moment and preventing or minimizing this bigger picture.
Yeah. I would guess that this person has a PDAer that's between the ages of like 4 and 8. I feel like that is the window where societally our kids pick up on the subtle undertones of all the things that start being expected from them. And so they start feeling more of that pressure. And then they start having that panic response. I want to say externalizing, but not all PDAers do. But the things that we see, right? The screaming and the destroying things and that kind of stuff. I think that's part of it. And in that age, you've also got the strong desire to connect with peers, yet the difficulty in maintaining the relationships. You've got this desire to jump in and have games, but then to want to control them and not be able to lose, or not be able to have anyone, if they don't follow your rules, then they're just, you're done. And there is the screaming, there is this sense of like, I need to fight back and defend myself because I'm so overwhelmed that this didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go. And now I feel exposed and vulnerable and out of control, right? So part of it is, again, setting our expectation that this age and stage is difficult with PDA, because you're already dealing with this high rate of change and maturity in general. With autism, you're looking at, probably a little bit of a lag than you might see in peers, which again impacts interaction and even with siblings and stuff, right? And then just that sense of frustration, and a lot of that feeling, even the intensity of it, maybe feeling more new to them. So those reactions feeling a lot stronger. Again, burner to low, keep it as low as you can. What kinds of demands can we take off all the time that give us more bandwidth for these situations? Amanda Diekman, actually, she did a Q&A a while ago that's really worth watching, that's on the YouTube channel. And she talks about how she always gives her one PDAer a third option. If they're worried about winning and losing, this kiddo is the one who gets to be the referee, who gets to be the timer, who gets to decide that, like, okay, this time we're going to play the game backwards, and coming up with creative ways to engage and be a part of it that don't have to do with winning or losing, if that makes sense. And then I think the one other piece that I would add, and then Brooke, just in case I derailed somewhere as I'm talking, you can help me bring it back around. But I would say that, so we found that YouTube, when we would moderate, like, we're not, every family is different, but in our family, YouTube is not a free for all. We've got like certain things that we watch. And there were these families and sibling groups who would do these challenges together and do these videos. And sometimes they were loud and they made me feel like my head was going to explode. But my daughter was picking up essentially what you would call social scripts or social stories, things that our kids, if they were neurotypical, would be picking up in everyday interactions with their peers. But because of their autism and PDA, they're kind of hindered. And then the peers kind of sense something and then they back up, or our kid responds and they run away. And they're not getting the chance to have those exposures and to learn those scripts and those interactions. My daughter learned a lot of them watching these kids and families and coming and showing them to me, and us watching them together and talking about them. And then I would see her on the playground and she would pull out these little scripts or these little interactions, and she would mimic them and play them out within social settings. And then she would get positive peer feedback. And then she'd be able to stay within the realms of interacting with them a little bit longer, which helped her mature a little bit more and stretch her nervous system a little bit more as she gained capacity and strength. So did I cover all the little bits of
Yeah,
that?
I think
Okay.
so. Yeah, no, that was really good, Cheryl. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I'm reading the chat here. Just looks like you have a webinar coming up next month as well.
Mm-hmm.
We had somebody ask about unanswered questions, and we'll kind of regroup after this and see. Maybe we'll offer a follow-up Q&A. I mean, I'm always volunteering for things, so me or you or somebody.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, we try to answer as many questions as we can, or if not, sometimes I'll go on email and I'll try to follow up with people and give them resources and stuff too. So hopefully this answers a few of your guys' questions.
Yeah.
But
Thank
yeah,
you guys
thank
for
you.
coming
Yeah,
today.
thank
And
you,
thanks to
Cheryl.
everyone who was in a place to be able to let me see your faces. I appreciate it so
Awesome.
much.
It's
All
wonderful.
right.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks. Thanks, Brooke. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Hi there, this is Ruth from PDA North America. We had such a great response from all the questions that we got for our Q&A with Cheryl on the topic of siblings and PDA that we decided to just make a part 2. So we're going to edit these two together, and I'm going to pick up where Brooke left off. And I've got 2 PDA kids home right now, so we might get some interruptions, but we'll see how it goes.
From mine too.
Great. So stop me if this is a question you already got, but I think this is where we left off. Okay, how to support both kids, 3-year-old PDA and a 7-year-old autistic PDA, when playing together. Separately is easier, but want to coach them and teach them skills for playing together. We advocate for taking a turn, offering ideas, reminding that it's okay if they want to do it differently, but the 3-year-old challenges the 7-year-old too much eventually, and the 7-year-old picks something up to throw at us to equalize. I always comfort my 3-year-old and ask if they're doing okay, and of course hug my 7-year-old once he lets me, but it can frequently turn into an hour-long meltdown for him where he's pushing us away, trying to climb the walls and destroy things. How would you handle this?
Okay, so I think I'd do a little bit of a reframe, right? We want to identify kind of our highest goals for our families or our deepest values. And so it sounds like from this family, my deepest value is that my kids are connected and that they learn to play well together. My highest value is that they have a good relationship. And in our minds, we have an idea of what that looks like. And what it looks like is them having these opportunities to play together and to do these things. I would say that we are looking at doing things much more incrementally for our kids. So I would look for less opportunities to do that so that they have the opportunity to experience it and have it be positive. And then over time, as they mature, as they have their accommodations that they need to feel supported and safe, and as they mature at their own pace, they are naturally going to be able to increase the amount of time that they can be together and do these things. And they'll continue to build that on their own. I know in our minds, we have a picture in our heads of what we expected our kids to do or to play together, how long that should be, how often that should be. But I would say that you're getting an idea of what their actual capacity is from what you're seeing, and spacing it out really helps. We've lived this. My kids are 3 years apart, and when there were seasons where they were inseparable, there were seasons where it was nothing but constant traumatic blow-ups for both of them, very traumatic. And we really learned to give the space that one needed and found ways to kind of meet the other one and accommodate for them in the gaps, and then let them kind of find each other again along the way. And it started becoming a lot more positive with a lot less meltdowns.
That is a great answer. We have similar issues at my house as well, where it's sometimes you just have to totally shift those expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
What are our
survival.
wins? Our wins look different, right?
That's exactly right. All right, thank you for that. Our next question is, I have an 11-year-old son who no doubt has PDA. He's constantly equalizing against his 2 older siblings who are 15 and 17, and it is often miserable for them to be in the same room together. We're starting to wonder whether our 17-year-old might be internalized PDA, and whether this might be part of the reason why our son's equalizing is often met with more equalizing in response. We've explained to the older kids what's going on with them, but their willingness and ability to accommodate him is super low, especially with our oldest. Do you have any advice whether or not she does have PDA as well, and how we can create some more peace in our home?
Okay. Well, there are some PDA affirming providers, through PDA North America's website that you can kind of reach out to help you really discern if your kiddo is also PDA. I would say that we know our kids and we know our kids best. And so with what you're learning about or what you're reading or what you're hearing from other parents, if it feels like it aligns, then go with your gut, because having someone official tell you it's so or not doesn't really change what you can do at home when you're deciding, hey, we're going to be a low demand, high accommodation kind of family. Um, the younger equalizing against the older, it makes a lot of sense. There's that sense of wanting to be equal. There's that sense of they're older, they have more opportunities, or even just being bigger and stronger. My PDAer was livid at her friend for getting taller and for having a birthday 6 months before her. And when I was explaining, she was like 6 years old, and I'm explaining that her friend didn't choose to be tall and didn't choose when she was born, my PDA was like, "You mean this is God's fault?" Like, and then she was just livid at God for making her friend, older and taller. It doesn't, even for my child, like she'll say that she knows that it doesn't necessarily make sense, but it doesn't mean it doesn't feel any less real inside for her. So I think that's probably where the equalizing is coming out against the older ones. Um, I think the shortest answer that takes a long time to unpack is to say, what does it look like to make the entire house high accommodation, low demand, high autonomy? How can you give as much as you can of that to the younger? How can you make sure that the older, has that as well? How can you give them needed space from one another? And then when you notice the spaces where they connect well together, and I'd say any sibling question that we're going to get today, this is something for that one. Any place that you see where they do connect well together, it's not a formula, but you kind of file it away and you just sort of strew opportunities for those kinds of interactions to happen when they want to. And they'll naturally move toward it when it's something that is feeling good for them. And the more positive associations they have with each other, the less activated they might automatically be with one another when one of them walks in the room. But when that's already been happening for a long time, then a lot of times you need that space, as much space as you can give from one another, to have sort of that healing and reprieve, to make room for potential positive experiences to be sprinkled in there. None of us love our kids or any of our family members being apart from each other a bunch, but it's kind of like if you had a really bad infection and your body needed to recover because it was too overwhelmed by whatever else is going around, and they needed to be secluded to recover. It's that way for our nervous systems too. So
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna also say there on the PDA North America website, if you go into the resources section under the free PDFs, there is Dr. Jennifer Huffman made a couple checklists to look at for children if you think they might be PDA, and then one for adults as well. So I think you were talking about your 17-year-old. So you might look at both of those, because kind of going into adulthood and see if that gives you any indicators. I had a similar experience where I have two children that are twins actually, and one of them was very obviously PDA, and we got him diagnosed early. And then we sent the other one to play therapy because we thought he was being traumatized from his brother, and that's what we were experiencing at home. And it was actually that therapist that was like, you maybe want to get him assessed. And we're like, no. And sure enough, he's autistic with an internalized PDA profile. And it just made our whole world make so much more sense once we were able to look at him through that lens and see why he wasn't understanding, when we would talk to him about his brother and how we have to accommodate his brother in certain ways and how his brain is different. We even had one moment where he said to us before the assessment, "But my brain's different too, Mom." And now the reflection of that, the aftermath, we're like, oh, we should have listened to him.
yeah,
So that's
they've
the
got
one thing I'll
some
say about that.
Yeah, and the other thing, the webinar that you guys did, Diane
Mhm.
did with someone whose name is escaping me, but
Amy brought that up.
yeah,
Yeah,
siblings under conflict is a great one. That's a great
yeah,
resource for people to do too.
absolutely. And that one's on the PDA Learning Lab. Okay, our next question is my 8-year-old PDA child is a completely different kid when his older brother, who's 10-year-old, is not around. I get that it's his only sibling and there's natural rivalry, but he also loves and adores his brother. He thinks of him fondly when they are apart. Why is it that he almost preys on his brother when they're together?
Yeah. Um, I think he does have that love and affection. I think that our PDAers can be super affectionate, especially in their own ways. Um, when when the siblings are kind of together in the same space, there are a few things going on. For one, if you are your kiddo's primary co-regulator, and now all of a sudden they are sharing your attention with someone else, they automatically feel less safe. Not because anything threatening is happening to them, but by the sheer fact that you are currently not completely available should they need you. And so that just kind of checks off a little bit of anxiety within them. And if you're sharing that attention with your other kiddo, there's going to be equalizing or acting out against what they see as the source of what's taking away their felt safety, their co regulator. So I think that being aware of that is really helpful. Maybe trying, if you're in a situation where you have a spouse or a partner or another family member who um, does well with the PDA as well, and you can kind of divide a little bit, divide and conquer, even if it's for short little pockets of time where you can give some undivided attention to your 10-year-old, and then you can circle back and have that time and attention with your PDA so that it's not happening right in front of their face. I think that could be really helpful. And I would say heavy dopamine loading for your PDA when you go to do those things. Even right now, Ruth and I, we're just kind of laughing in the laugh or cry way that we do about what we needed to do to kind of like front load our PDAs for success so we could even be here to have this conversation. And so I know, 3 or 4 things that are dopamine wins for my daughter. She has all of those right now so that I can be here and she can feel kind of calm and satiated. And then I'm immediately going to be circling back with her after so she knows I'm available again. So I think try those things out and see if that doesn't help turn some of that, I don't want to say aggression because I don't know if you necessarily said it went that far, but if it turns some of that negativity away from your 10-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah, and a thing I'll add to it too is like the person asked like the why are they preying on them? And like a mindset shift for me when kind of going through this whole process was like these kids, they constantly feel like they're like kind of like lesser than somebody else. And
Mm-hmm.
having an older brother can be like that much harder because like how Cheryl was talking about a minute ago, like the older brother like might be bigger, might be taller, might have more of certain things, might have more access to friends. Like all of those things feel like deep inequalities, which can trigger that threat response so fast. And I see that happen with my kids. We had a very, like we have this exact same experience where we took our kids apart from one another thinking they needed a break. My husband took one on a vacation. I kept the externalizer. And the whole week I thought he was going to be having the best time of his life. And instead he was so angry and so aggressive the whole time because he missed his brother. And I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
what? You're so mean to him now, and it's just
Yeah.
that mindset shift of like, they do love him. There's so much love there for them, but they cannot control that like lack of equality and that feeling and that need to constantly level all the time. It's
Yeah.
so internalized that they
Yeah.
don't have that control over it.
And
Um,
my daughter, I feel like she's got just great, really fantastic personal insight and ability to verbalize what she's trying to say, unlike me right now. What's going on inside of her, and she'll even say, she'll just like, I want to do these things, or I want to, be with these people, but my brain just doesn't let me, or I just get so angry and I wish that I didn't. And so there's that awareness, right? They want to be engaging in these positive ways. but they cannot help the fight or flight and that sense of inequality that's going on inside of them, telling them that something's super wrong. And so it's just a real battle within them,
Yeah. And
which
I think,
increases our empathy.
yeah, exactly. And I think the more you go through this kind of, I don't know where this person's at in their journey, but the more you learn about PDA and how to accommodate that, it's kind of the sadder part of it, because it's the more that comes out in the child, their threat response is lowered, and then they're just so deeply aware of their own personal experience and what and how hard it is for them. We've seen a lot of that come out this last year, which is heartbreaking as a parent.
Yes.
Okay, our next question is, what are some strategies for managing screaming and yelling at a non-PDA sibling? What are some strategies to use when our PDA kiddo is in a more intense phase of controlling behavior? The games, interactions, meals, conversations all include trying to control the non-PDA's behavior. Looking for advice on both addressing in the moment and in prevention and minimizing in the big picture.
Okay. And forgive any kind of redundancy. I think it's a positive and a negative, that a lot of the answers are very similar. And in some ways it's like, okay, well, we have a simple framework that if we can learn to use as our lens to view our kids and to operate within our homes, that we are really going to be able to shift what's happening. On the other hand, it's like, well, don't we just wish that there were a million other really helpful things that we could add in for every specific situation? I'm going to put in my other earbud because I hear people outside my door and I can't think and listen at the same time. Sorry. So, which means we might also get visitors. Just be prepared. Oh no, and now I have no hearing. Oh, did I?
Because I
Oh,
muted,
now
because I had
I
a
can hear
visitor
you.
too.
Oh, perfect. I was like, oh no, now I've ruined it. Okay. So, yep, let me just go back. Screaming and yelling at the other sibling. That was where we were. And I think I have this one too. Yeah. So prevention is huge for us in our PDA families, right? We are looking for uh, earlier in the recording, our one from the other day, I talked about just like your child being a pot on a burner, and the cooler we can keep the burner overall, the less likely we are to spike into the boiling zone quite so fast, if that makes sense, when something kind of comes up. And I know PDA, like one of the things that we talk about is the Jekyll and Hyde, how mood can just like flip on a dime and flip back and forth, really quickly, where it feels like it's out of nowhere, but it's not out of nowhere. There's something simmering and building underneath, getting it to that boiling point. So a big thing was I would look back days before even and say, like, what kind of stressors have been building up? What kinds of things have they been doing? Have they been sleeping well? Have they been eating well? Have they been around a lot of people? Have they been engaging in school? Have they been engaging in activities? Have family members been stopping by the house to visit? Do you have a chatty neighbor when you guys are waiting to go inside? I mean, like anything and everything where they are required to engage, interact, have patience, or be physically off in some way. Even a cold or allergies, all of these things, that is going to build up to whether or not when they're having an interaction with their sibling, they're going to be able to handle it in that moment, or they're going to explode, right? So we look at all of those things and we start thinking about how do we keep all those things lower over time. We did it this morning. Somebody stopped my husband when we were trying to leave somewhere, and I could tell my daughter was done. And so I literally left the two of them talking, and I was like, hey guys, we're going to go get the van and we'll circle back and we'll pick up dad. And so we walked off. Like, in another life before PDA, I would have felt like that's really rude and the kids should sit and they can wait for a minute. And no, that's not what we're spending our energy on. We were already here doing what we were doing. That was a big enough demand. Now we're leaving, and we're going to make it easier to kind of transition and not use as many spoons. So I would look at that. And then in the moment, distraction is huge. Humor can be huge. Dopamine go-tos. I know that for my kiddo, she doesn't want to be angry. She doesn't want to be mean. She will express remorse almost obsessively. afterward. No, even if she's been like forgiven and everything's fine and she's, just going to keep saying sorry. She just feels so awful. And so sometimes it might just be me going to the little pantry and getting a Hershey's Kiss out and then just kind of holding out my hand with it and then just saying, would it help to watch a show? Very few words, really kind of flat affect, not coercing, not touching, coming down low if I can, or even side to side and not making eye contact at all. And then her being able to transition to something else that is kind of like it's like mindfulness, like shifting her attention to something else. And then I can circle over to my youngest and try to connect and make sure that there's a sense of felt safety there. So yeah, prevention and then distraction and dopamine. Unless we're talking about safety, in which case we would want to lean more into a safety plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay. How do you think about and manage a PDA kid that's 9 and a younger sibling that's 5 when the PDA kid takes so much of the oxygen in the room, the house, and life? Added bonus is a PDA parent is the primary caregiver and all 3 are home unschooling. Any perspective on giving the second kid enough and supporting the PDA kid and oneself? Thanks.
Okay, well, first things first, hop on Instagram and start following No Pressure PDA, because Brooke Madeira, who was stepping in for Ruth in the first part of this, she is a PDAer, raising PDAers, homeschooling, unschooling, and so she's got great stuff out in her posts, and she shares a lot on Facebook as well. So I think just to feel seen and heard and known by another parent having your experience when it's so rare to find parents who understand what we're going through, I would for sure do that for your own mental well-being. And then I think it would be helpful to know, like, how long have you guys been doing low demand? Are your kiddos is your kiddo in burnout? Are you in burnout? For how long? What kind of accommodations do you guys have in place? Because I think that the answer is what happens over time is the more accommodation there is. Sorry, there's really loud counting. Can you hear it? Okay. Apparently there's hide and seek happening right there, just right here.
Right there. Mm-hmm.
That's okay though. That's it, right? Yeah, like, oh, mom needs us to be quiet. Is this quiet? No? Okay. But they're playing, so it's great. So yeah, just my goodness, my train of thought. Whew, here we go. Help me, Ruth. My train of thought. Where was it?
Fine. Now I'm lost because I hear my kids, so I'm staying on mute.
Sorry. Okay, so we were talking about
yeah, I do think it's a really finding other people in your tribe is really helpful in these circumstances.
Yes.
Because one of the biggest, so I'm married to a husband that identifies with PDA. He's severely ADHD. I have 2 PDA kids. I was diagnosed ADHD and very identify with internalized PDA. So we're kind of like a household of us. And it wasn't until I kind of really, it was Brooke, who's one of my closest friends now, connected with this PDA tribe and really realized I was trying to hold it all together and I'm doing all these things. And she said to me one day, you do realize that your whole family's in burnout, right? It's not just this one kid, or not just they're all the circumstances that are happening. So, and just even somebody saying that to me, kind of gave me that permission to just even realize it. And I know I'm not going to make any assumptions here, but just even I can feel in this post right here, or in this question, I can just feel how hard it must be. And I don't know if you're a single parent, but I could not imagine being a single parent home with my kids, and doing the unschooling route as well. So, connecting with other people that really get it and that understand your circumstances is the biggest piece of advice that I can give, because it just gave me I put so much into my family that there was no mirror back on me. And being able to just realize that and take a step back and being able to go to my husband and talk about that as well, and kind of realize where I needed to be accommodated too, not just my kids being accommodated. And trying to figure out those, even just those little 2 minutes. I mean, we don't have, amazing babysitters, and we don't have all these,
Yeah.
places we can just
Self-care is
drop our
micro.
kids
Our
off.
self-care is micro.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. So even just like I learned this song on Facebook or through something on Facebook that's called Weightless, and it was like a song that was completely engineered by people, by like a neuroscientist or something. And it literally, every time I just put my earpods on and listen to like 3 minutes of this song, it like unwires my brain. It's amazing. It calms me back down. But just even
I'm
the,
writing it down.
it's incredible. It like literally is it was a life-changing song for me. But finding those little moments, because it can be so, so, so hard. So just big hugs to you, because I know it's not an easy life.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? And now I remember what she was saying. She was saying
Oh,
about
good.
all the air being taken out of the room,
Yes, yes.
you know, and that's why we were talking about what's the circumstance? How old are the kids? How long have they been low demand? All of that. And it's because over time, as there's accommodation and healing, you know, as nervous systems get a chance to kind of like rest, relax, and reset, that's where we're going to have that less agitation and that less activation. And your PDA is going to stop feeling so bad inside. It's exhausting to feel this bad, you know. And I know
Yeah.
my daughter, if we were driving along and she couldn't think of a reason to be angry, she would just look and she was like, I wish the trees weren't green.
Yeah.
It was like, there has to be a reason why I feel this way. I'm
Yeah.
finding one, you know?
Yeah.
But really, what it was is she just had too much on her and we didn't know it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And even once we took it all off of her, it took time for her to heal and reset. And
Mm-hmm.
then the way she moved through life and through our family and through our home changed dramatically. But we had to stick with it. It was really stretching.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Our next question is, I homeschool 4 kids, 2 with PDA. My oldest son with PDA is age 14, orders the other 3 around all day, grabs things from them, spits at them, calls them names, swears, screams in their faces, and sometimes destroys their belongings. He does all kinds of things to annoy them, and he often likes to act like a bully, making the other kids scared and causes screaming all day. We are very low demand with him. Because we are low demand and basically unschool him, he gets bored and makes ordering around the others his hobby. I give him lots of game time on the computer, and anything above 3 hours a day makes him more angry and aggressive, so we try not to go beyond the 3 hours. He has the option to explore interests, go outside. What are some other ways we can promote more calm in our home? My other kids say they hate him, they can't stand being around him, and they can't wait to grow up and never see him again. My heart. So
Heartbreaking.
1, I would love any more tips about bringing calm into the home. And 2, how can I help his siblings not hate him? I explained PDA to him, but they say that though they get it, they are sick of it all. They are ages 13, 10, and 9. It's all so hard. Oh, my
It
heart
is
breaks.
also hard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
absolutely. Well, I think for one thing, I would try to dig a little deeper on why is that 3 hour mark a point of real dysregulation in terms of the gaming and that kind of stuff. And everybody knows their kid, right? We need to um, learn and understand and advocate for the child that we have in front of us, right? And but I know a lot of PDA kids having that access to screens on and off as they want all throughout the day is extremely regulating for them. And it's where they get socialization. It's where they get creative ideas. It's where they're kind of able to pursue their interests in a way where they can kind of observe and control. And let's just talk about video games. Um, let's talk about the positives, right? We hear enough in the media and everything about negatives, right? But on the positive side, for a child that feels completely out of control of their inner life, to have something where you get to control your character completely and accomplish things, right? That it really gives a sense of mastery and you know of well control, right? To be able to do these things and make this person do these things, which he's then now doing to people in real life. So I I guess I would just maybe suggest taking a tester of increasing that time, maybe in different ways, maybe with certain YouTube playlists or something that you feel positive about, or other things even related to video games that he like a class on gaming or anything that he might be interested in. Not that you're pushing, but that you just sign up for, maybe just make available to him to kind of pop in and out of. These might be ways for him to get to engage in what he wants to. I wonder if part of it could be that he's pushing back because he has this very firm boundary in place. Um, and I know some families, once they kind of took the screen limits off for a time, the child naturally weaned themselves down, if that kind of makes sense. Now, it's a high need in our house. My daughter has access to it from the time she wakes up until she's able to fall asleep, which looks different every night. She takes breaks on her own to do things like painting or baking or wanting to go outside or whatever. And she can now participate in things like drama classes and stuff like that. And we unschool. But a huge portion of her day is engaging and learning and interacting through YouTube videos and drawing apps and all kinds of things like that. So what ways can he have more autonomy within his interests, even if they aren't maybe our preferred ones? And I don't want this person to not, I don't want this mom or dad to not feel heard, because they did say he becomes more aggressive after 3 hours. But I would really just wonder, like, okay, where's that cutoff when he starts showing that aggression? And is it because you're trying to get him to stop and to do something else, to join for dinner, to do a chore, to engage in a class, to go to bed, whatever, and see if maybe that is more of the trigger than the gaming itself?
Yeah. I feel very similarly. I was also going to say, like, at 13, is there the opera? I don't know how your relationship is with him, but if you have a good trusting relationship built, that can you take a collaborative approach together and say, hey, like, we want to give you more autonomy with this, but this is where we're struggling with it. And just let them know, like, we see this more aggression. Do you feel it? Like, and are there things that we can, like, explore together that might feel safer or might help you feel more calm? And I think it really kind of depends on where you're in your relationship with them, for that to happen. But I know with my child, we were able to, once that trust was built, have that conversation, and there was a little more understanding around that. And like Cheryl said, like, we gave them, our kids also have full access from the minute they wake up till they go to bed. And they have started, there was a day where there was 15 hours a day on it.
Mm-hmm.
There was a day where I was like, oh my gosh, what have we done? There were many
Right,
days
I
like
know.
that. What have we done? What have we done? And there were
Panic.
also many days where we saw so much more aggression because they were on it so much as well. But that's also a clue that, like, there's a lot more dysregulation happening as well. So once we were able to kind of figure out other things to help lower that dysregulation, my child only wanted to watch really creepy, macabre, scary stuff all the time. He called anything that was, like, for his age group, baby stuff. And once we were able to kind of fine tune some other areas and figure out what was going on in other places, he's now kind of fine tuning himself on what he's watching. He's not wanting to watch that stuff anymore. So it's a hard balance. And
It's well, and I think, oh, I'm so sorry I cut you
no,
off.
go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to say that when our kids feel out of control, one of the ways that I think they dopamine seek and they equalize is shock. Shocking things create a response in others that is a dopamine win for them. And so being drawn to gore or calling horrible names, or even my daughter had a thing where she would, like, hide really important things like keys and wallets and whatever. But it was about being able to kind of control these big reactions in the people around her that were controlling her, right? And so when there is more autonomy, I find that there's less pursuit of those extremes because there's less desire to create shock in others.
Oh, I forgot I was on mute. Yes, absolutely. Okay. This person has a few questions. I'm gonna kind of narrow it down. One is,
Okay.
how do you suggest you help and direct the non-PDA sibling to stand up for themselves? Do you suggest they do it in the moment? Is this a conversation you're having at a later time? We have a lot of equalizing going on against the sibling, and there's unfortunately no mention of age here, so I'm not sure the age group, but.
Okay. Yeah. So in our house, for the PDA and the non-PDA, we call it self-advocacy, right? And actually we call that for like in and out of the home as well. We don't even use the word boundaries. We say like, you self-advocate, you know about yourself and you say what you need. That's self-advocating. So in our case, I mean, I would love to paint a beautiful picture of how we do this, and then this is the step by step, and then everyone calmly comes together and we reconnect and we repair the rupture and wait, because like that's what you want, you know, that's the aim for sure. Um, and and I grew up just outside of Philadelphia, so when I'm dysregulated, I'm a little more edgy. um, so there are times where when my child is when my non-PDA child is being equalized against by my PDA child, um, he will explode back at her, or sometimes he'll even do it preventatively when he feels any sense of her trying to control him, right? And so and there are times where I then am louder than everyone so that I can be heard for a second, and then we all bring it back down and we all apologize and connect and repair. But what we're really looking to do is to help the younger sibling, in this case, self-advocate and basically say like, this doesn't feel good to me. I don't like being talked to this way. Like, not out loud, but even that they can identify these things in their own head, age appropriately. My 7-year-old is not necessarily using these phrases in his head, but just the phrases in their head of like, this is not okay. I feel better if I'm in a different room. I feel better if I get mom or dad. I feel better if I stop talking to my sibling and I go watch a show, or I go shoot basketball hoops or whatever. Like, basically helping your child identify how they feel in the moment, that it's not okay for them to be treated in a way that hurts them, right? Even if the person doing it doesn't mean to do it and loves them, it's still not okay that they would be treated that way. And how can they remove themselves and be in a place where they can feel safe from that?
Yeah.
Right. And so, because what you're not going to do in the moment with one sibling to a PDA child is have that sibling talking to the PDA child and saying, you can't talk to me this way. You can't treat me this way. It's not fair. You're being mean, because the PDA is not the prefrontal cortex is like not in charge right now. Right.
Yeah.
That'll come in later, and they actually will feel really bad, usually, whether they can express it or not. They're in the fight or flight mode. So verbalizing to them is kind of a moot point then. It's more about, what are we training the siblings to say to themselves, to identify for themselves, and to create a plan of how they can get themselves in an emotionally or physically safe space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that as well, and it depends on the age of the child, but like, if it's a younger child, you can do all of those, you can model all of those things. I model all of those things all day long to my kids. Like, ooh, the way that the energy in the room right now feels really intense, so I'm gonna
Yes.
step out right now. Just even like saying the stuff out loud, like, helps them to start even learning, like, oh, okay, like my kids start doing that now, which is shocking
I
to me.
love it.
They
Yeah.
do it a
Because
little.
you're showing them how you have self-awareness, and you can identify what you need, and you take steps to do it. And that's exactly what they need to learn to do. And those are
Yeah.
huge life skills for like
Yeah,
every kid.
absolutely. I think this next question, I think, is going to be hopefully, I think, a pretty quick one. But how do
Okay,
you encourage?
I'll try.
No, I know. How do you encourage a PGA child to agree to attend their other siblings' events and activities?
Hey, gut level, you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to. I get why you want them to. What I would ask your PDA kiddo, what meaningful thing can they do to express encouragement to their sibling, right? Or friend. My daughter for years couldn't go to birthday parties because the attention being on somebody else and the amount of people and the noise was just too much for her. And so we would do a coffee date with a friend for their birthday, and she would skip the party completely. And so I think that what you do with the sibling activities is like, hey, yeah, going and sitting through the demand to get ready, the demand to get in the car, the demand to be on time, the demand to sit somewhere and hold still and be quiet and watch the whole time, the demand to keep waiting, even though you're bored or you're cold or you're uncomfortable or you're hungry or whatever the things, then the demand to wait for your other sibling to pack up all their stuff, to get back to the car, to drive home when everyone's hungry and tired, to get out of the car, to get back into the house, to clean up and get rid of all the stuff from the sporting event or whatever. Like, it already sounds exhausting, all the more for your PDAer. So instead of asking them to do that, it's like, would it be so cool if like maybe grandma came and hung out with you and you guys watched a movie and baked some cookies and you could draw a picture saying like with a, you know, of your brother hitting a baseball, and you could give it to him when he came home and tell him that you hope he had a good game, right? How can you create a positive connection that doesn't require your kid to go?
Yeah. That's
Sorry,
great.
1 second. I just have to open
You're
and close
fine,
my
yeah.
door real quick.
No, you're fine. All right, that was quick. Okay, let's see here. Lost where I was on my questions.
We just talked about the sporting event.
Sporting event, thank you.
Yeah. And then the next is sharing that they're genuinely afraid, I think. Is that where we're at?
Probably. I just accidentally hit the scrolling button here and yep. Okay, there we go. Okay. Yes. How would you handle when a PDA is criticizing, correcting, and constantly reminding the non-PDA sibling who has a disability and low self-esteem during family games, activities, etc.?
Okay. So in earlier, our questions from the other day, I mentioned about something that Amanda Diekman said that I loved, which is that she gives her PDA an alternate role, right? And for her, that was more about winning and losing. So she would give, you know, one of her PDAers the chance to be the referee or to be the one that kind of manages the rules or whatever. I'd look for an opportunity to give your PDAer an area of focus and ownership in the game that kind of takes some of that focus and that energy. And I would even, empathy for our PDAers is so huge. You know, every person is different. Every person is a person, right? But by and large, from the people that I've listened to, because if we're not listening to people with PDA, then we have no business saying anything about it. It there's just such a high sense of care and justice and looking out for those in need. And so maybe even trying to find a way for your kiddo to like showing them like, hey, this is your brother or sister's disability, and like, could you be in charge of being their encourager, because this game's actually really hard and it's so hard to remember the rules or it's so hard to whatever. So giving them one kind of job in the game that takes up most of their energy, maybe they dish out the cards, maybe they are keeping the score or whatever, and then also kind of saying like, do you feel like after every time they get a turn you could be the one that says like, you did a great job, and find one thing good you can tell them about it, you know, not in a demanding way, like suggesting and brainstorming with them. It really invite them in to collaborate. Hello. Oh no, are you going to turn me off?
Oh,
Oh,
Pause.
pause.
Unpause.
that was a close one.
Pause.
Can you
Pause.
unpause
It's
her?
hard. It's really hard not to blink.
Yep. Can I get a big hug? Are you trying to turn the TV off from the other room? Okay. I know you want me to stop. How about like in 10 minutes? Okay, you can put it on, buddy. All right.
And I know we've gone a little long, so whenever you need
Yeah.
to round up, you let me know.
Yeah, we're okay. Let's see here. Okay. My PDA's typical younger sibling feels okay. I guess the typical non-PDA.
Like neurotypical.
Yep.
Okay.
Younger sibling feels unfairly treated. Can you hear me over the Ash Ketchum singing?
I
over there?
totally can. Yeah,
Okay,
I hear you. Fine.
okay. Feels unfairly treated when we place even minimal demands on him. How can we teach him responsibility and helpfulness when his sibling can't be asked to do things around the house? Talking about needs and accommodations and fair is not equal has not helped.
Yeah. So kind of repeating myself a little bit from other questions, but because it's so good to it bears repeating, you know. um what if the demands kind of the home are lower for everybody, right? And what if you know, there's a correlation. There are studies like kids who have had chores from a young age tend to have better self-confidence and, you know, follow through and so on. Okay, but what if it's not as much about the chores as much as it is having a sense of personal responsibility and autonomy to accomplish something, right? That instills those things as well. So what if we found the areas that our kids were interested in and we poured into giving them autonomy in those spaces and the chance to have a sense of personal accomplishment in those spaces, right? Like if we're trying to grow those character traits of perseverance and responsibility, there are other ways to do it other than chores. Your kid, if your child grows up later, and case in point, because I had childhood onset OCD, there were a lot of chores my mom did not have me do, because it was extremely difficult for me because I had a lot of contamination issues and whatever. I did not grow up and not learn, like I know how to clean a toilet now. I know how to do laundry. I know how to vacuum. I know how to mow the grass. I know how to load the dishwasher. I can do all of it. It's not because my mom had me do it 5 times a week since I was 7, you know. What we poured into and what I think is important for us to do in our low demand homes is we poured into relational felt safety, because I can easily learn to pick up those chores as I get older and they are more meaningful to me. Like even with your own room or when you get your own first place or whatever, what I can't as easily undo is a deep sense of relational inequity with the most important people in my life.
We also have a great download on the PDF section under the resources on felt safety. That is it's a great one that you kind of just referenced, the felt safety. It made me think of that one to check out.
It's like my favorite phrase.
I know.
And like that's like the primary goal of our home, felt safety and connection.
Okay, my daughter is my older daughter, 11-year-old non-PDA, is always struggling with the unfairness that is present in our house. She sees younger sister 8, who's PDA, get a lot of things that she doesn't. How do we teach her that equality means that everyone gets what they need to thrive and validate her feelings of unfairness?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would ask what kind of things. I would want to know what things is she seeing her sister get that she's not getting. And I would I would ask the parents to do some deep work of looking at why can't come in. It's okay. No, you can come in. Hey, Nora, it's okay, baby. Open the door. Okay.
Do you need to pause?
Yeah, just for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you about that. Thanks.
No problem. Let's see here. Did I ask a question? I don't think I did. Did I?
You did. I feel like we were right in the middle of talking about it, and then my kiddo needed me.
It's okay, Daddy. It's okay. Oh, we were talking about struggling with the unfairness.
Yeah. Oh, and we were wondering what things is one sister getting that the other one wants, right?
Exactly.
I think that that's part of where we as parents have to do the work of like what so when I work with families, the kind of the catchphrase that I always go to and try to have them rehearse in their heads is what is going to be the least traumatic and the best for connection. Hi. And trauma isn't just for least trauma isn't just for our PDAers. It's for the kids and for us as well, right? And so there are times where like maybe we wouldn't have given our other kiddo X, Y, and Z in another universe, but this is our reality. This is where we are. And is it less relationally traumatizing to is it less relationally traumatizing to allow them to have these things and feel more connected to you, and you engage with them through those things, or you take some of the expectations off of them? Because the thing is they are still actually living up under a tremendous expectation that most kids their age are not, and that is living in the shadow of an intense disability. And I wrote a little bit about this in the article on sibling dynamics on PDA North America, because my husband grew up with an older sibling with severe disability. So we're super sensitive in our home of like, what is it like to live under that impact? And so a case in point in our home is that my non-PDA child plays far more video games than I ever dreamed I would feel okay with. But engaging with him on that, because it's something really meaningful to him, really feels good to him and really makes him feel connected to us, especially when he sees his sister have access to her iPad anytime, all day long. And so, what are we aiming for? We are aiming for a sense of like, we hear you, we see you, we're engaging with you. Yes, we encourage you to step away more often than we encourage her. Yes, we also are doing these other activities with you, but we're giving him a lot more leeway than we would have, because we want him to feel safe and loved and accepted, and not like he's constantly in the shadow of of something that just feels massively unfair. And it kind of is, right? I mean, it's the emotional feeling of it is, and for us to just sit with them in that, and then to try to help them feel as much better about that as they can. So to do that with them.
I wish I had heard any of that, but I had my
I,
phone the
you,
whole time.
you were totally fine. I saw you like nodding, and I'm like, she is managing it. So like,
We've got one dressed up as Ash Ketchum from Pokemon right now, and the other one is
excellent.
putting his Pikachu costume on. So we might get a performance here in a minute. We'll see.
Well, I was swearing a blue streak, so you'll have to do a lot of editing. No.
Okay. Let's see here. This is a good question. How do you teach siblings to understand what equalizing behavior is and how to respond to it? There was a whole bunch written here, but I'm gonna
That's the nutshell.
okay, guys, it's okay. But I'm gonna just summarize it with that, because I think that's a really great question.
Yeah, I think that depending on the age of the child is a huge piece of it. Hey, sweetheart, you want to come in?
I'm just gonna ask my question.
Sure, yeah.
It's a real question. But I did an ice cream instead of the milkshake because my ice cream was easier to
That's
use, and
fine.
it was also open.
Hey, that's fine. You did great. Was it good? Awesome.
I also gave everything.
Thank you, my love. I appreciate it. But honey, it's okay. Hey, can you pause me again real quick?
Absolutely. All right, so I think we're gonna make this our last question, because both of us have had quite a few disturbances a little late
Yes,
in the
we
evening.
have.
Here anyways, I know it's a little earlier there.
No, yeah, no, here.
So the question was, how do we teach our siblings to understand what equalizing behavior is and how they should respond to it?
Yeah, so I would, one, it would really matter how old they are, right? And so I think older kids, you can explain it in a lot of the ways that you would, I'd say teens and up, the way that we would with adults, where when there's this sense of something being really unfair, and someone's first impulse being to somehow kind of knock the other person down a notch, and they can kind of understand that abstract idea. I would say that maybe with the younger kids, kind of paralleling it with something that they can understand, and just saying like, hey, if somebody takes something from you on the playground, or they push you, and you might have this feeling inside like you just want to push them back, or you want to grab the toy back because it wasn't fair, and you're trying to make it fair again. And so sometimes what happens is that for your brother or your sister, there's a little alarm. It's like in their brain, and it's saying like, hey, that's not fair. And it might not be something that you did that really isn't fair. It might just be that they notice that you're a little taller than them, or you're getting more attention from mom or dad today, or you're really good at doing a flip on the trampoline, and they suddenly feel like they aren't as good as you. And even though they know you're not doing it on purpose, and you're not trying to say, they're not trying, like, they know that you're not trying to say you're better and they're worse, there's this little alarm in their brain saying, they're trying to be better than you. That's not fair. And so they lash out and they might say something mean, or they might hit you, or they might break something you care about, because for them it feels like something they care about, who they are, is being hurt by you. And it doesn't make sense, and they don't want to do it, and they always feel really bad inside later if, when they do these things. And it's one of the things that makes them feel so scared and so sad, because they love you, they don't want to hurt you, they don't want to get in trouble, but they can't stop their brain from panicking. So it's not all going to happen at once. We're not going to have this big conversation and explain it to them and it's going to be like, oh yeah, it's going to happen little bits at a time. Over time, we're going to build a foundation. We're going to build a shared language as a family that we draw on. We're like, oh, the alarm was going off in his brain again.
Yeah.
The panic button got pushed again. Oh man, and kind of creating a plan for what you can do to help that child feel emotionally and physically safe. And then kind of circling back and trying to help them see their sibling separate from the meltdown, separate from the equalizing, because it's not personal. It feels incredibly personal, but it is not a choice.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And from my lived experience, if you find that all of that explaining is just doing nothing, and it's going nowhere, and it's just
too many words. It could be too many words. Yeah.
Then it could just be that the other child might have an internalized expression of PDA, which is what our case was. We were just like, what? None of this is like, we can't get anything to set in, and everything's becoming such a power struggle with the other one, and we're almost seeing him learning all these equalizing behaviors back, and
and thinking that it's learned,
thinking
right?
that it was
Thinking
learned,
that
and it was the
right.
other child was experiencing it all. It was just so much more internalized that it eventually came out. And so, yeah, I'm not saying that's everybody's case, but it's definitely something to, when you have one in the family, it's, there might be another.
Heredity is a huge
Yeah.
factor. And I'll just I'll put this little note in here for adoptive families. Because I think sometimes you were saying that you guys were doing play therapy for your other kiddo because you wondered if he was acting this way because of trauma from the PDA, right? And none of us are related in our family. Like, we're a twice adopted family. Nobody's related. But we really go back and forth sometimes on some of the reactions and behaviors we see from our youngest. Is that trauma being played out, or is there something else going on? And part of me is like, well, there's no way that we adopted 2 PDA kids. Like, what are the chances in the universe? But then there's another part of me that's like, don't take it off the table. Here's part of why. That whatever dynamics through multiple generations, which we happen to know the generations leading back for both of our kiddos because we have open adoptions, whatever dynamics were happening back through those generations, there were things that made life difficult and made it so that one or more of those generations were not able to parent, and to the point where we have our kiddo. So is the likelihood that we have a neurodivergent kiddo higher because of that? For sure. Right? Because when you don't have the coping and the support and the accommodations that you need, you might find yourself in a position to be considering adoption more than some other people. So, just for the what it's worth department, if your kids are all related, think heredity. If your kids are not all related, consider trauma, but also consider like what's a common, what are the common he's so cute. I know, but you've been so patient though. Oh, we're still here. I think it's still recording, but anyway, Ruth will edit this later. Are you good?
There's no better way to end this.
This is so great.
The great thing is it didn't even stop recording.
I was not sure. I was like, are we still? Should I talk or not? But
closed it off.
Yeah. So, well, thank you. It was just so great to talk with you and to hopefully help some families like ours feel a little better equipped to continue on in their journey.
Yes, thank you so much, Cheryl. We are so excited to be partnering with you and can't wait to do more. And
well,
yeah, and everybody else, I hope this helped you, and we will see you all soon. Take care.
let's go co-regulate.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.
Good night.